And today, for example, somebody like me, even though my own is a little bit better, because I'm from Nigeria, so we have 15 countries in the ECOWAS community. But I need a visa in almost, 38 countries, which means an American has more access into Africa than myself, because majority of them, they can go to the airport and get the visa and pass through. So I think what we need to do is to look at, okay, what does the future hold for us? What it holds for us is that if you look at it, even if today in Africa we've been growing the last 15 years at about 5.5%, and this 5.5%, majority of the countries really have no light, no power at all. So you imagine if we have sufficient infrastructure or sufficient power? And not only that, going forward, now you say, okay, fine. If we are going to even grow at 4.5% for the next till 2050, which is about 37 years, it means that Africa will have a total GDP of about 9 trillion. 9 trillion, that's twice China today. And it can happen, it's possible. You see, but what we need to do is that the governments really, they have to make a policy where Africa will not only be supplying raw materials.
It's about beneficiation.
Yes. So if you are now going to do something in Africa, yes, we'll give you the permit, but let's give you 4 or 5 years of which come and set up the factory there. Everything is there, cheap labor is there, the market is there, you sell some there, and then you export. But what is happening is that majority of our mineral resources, they've been exported and processed, and they process them and bring them to sell to us at about 10% the cost. So I think these are the areas that we need to look at.
Basically, you see, the issue of visa, I don't think it's a major problem. In Nigeria, where even I've come up with the policy that you can get a visa at the airport if you're entering to encourage business people. Before this time, our visa maximum was to be 2 years.
So is that operational, visa on arrival?
Yes, now we can give you up to 10 years. But the issue and the key problem where inter-African trade is limited is transportation infrastructure. For you to move from one African country to the other, sometimes you have to go to Europe, go outside Africa for you to access another African country.
So we need to talk to the airlines.
Yeah, of course, airlines, rail system, until you get this road linkages, until you get the infrastructure in place. The political decision is simple. A president can just wave anything overnight. But until we get the infrastructure, inter-African trade becomes a limited factor.
President Mahama, can you weigh in at this point?
Yeah, I would say I feel ashamed that trade between our countries is only 11%. It's unacceptable. We have these protocols on the books where we agree that goods and services and people can move freely amongst our countries. But the reality of the fact is that if you're taking products from Nigeria and bringing them to Ghana, you have to go through like 5, 6, 7 border checks. And at every border check, the amount of money you have to pay, especially in illegal collections, is so much. And so it needs a certain political will to be able to do that. And I can see that that will is beginning to develop. In Dakar, a few months ago, we passed the common external tariff. And so that paves the way for us to start to create a free trade area in our country, in our sub-region. But like I said, we need to take down the barriers, take down the border posts. One of the things we're doing is joint border posts between our countries so that there's just one border post to clear. But how lovely it would be if we just took them out completely and allowed people to move freely across.
Thank you very much. My name is Jimovia. I'm from Nigeria. I will speak on intra-African trade. One major problem between African countries have to do with the issue of doubt, mistrust, and probably xenophobia. Because just a few years ago, it took a whole presidency to intervene when one of the countries, I will mention the name, refused to allow Nigerian business people in on account of the fact that they didn't have yellow fever cards. And yellow fever has been eradicated all over the world. But that country insists you must have yellow fever vaccination before you get in there. You get into the United States, no one asks you about yellow fever vaccination. You get into Britain, no one asks you. You go into Ghana, no one asks you. But Nigerians go into this particular country, they stop them and maybe even deport them. So I call that mistrust and xenophobia, nothing else. Until it required it was going to create a whole diplomatic role before that country backed down a little bit, then it was resolved. That's number one. That also creates problem of intra-African trade. Mistrust.
I'm going to leave it to one comment per person. Okay. And again, that comes back to allowing the free movement of goods and people across the African continent.
Very correct. Finally, please allow me this. We have this issue of international media. I don't mean CNBC. Please, trust me.
Well, thank you very much. Otherwise, I will cut your mic.
They have this issue of what I would say stereotyping Africans and African businesses and African people in terms of the fact that corruption. They say, you type in Google about Africa and business opportunity, they tell you there's corruption there. They tell you there's wars. They tell you there's fighting.
This is your final point.
It's final point. You have about 300,000 Google entries on negativism and stereotyping of inferiority issues about Africa, whereas you have only about few hundreds of opportunities and economic development. Thank you so much. That's very important.
Thank you very much.